2024 is shaping up to be a pretty stacked year for games. Of course, we have some major titles coming from big studios, but I think I'm actually most excited for some of the lesser known games. I've got over 30 on my list here to share with you guys, including some that I think could be hidden gems. So let's take a look at the most promising RPGs, open worlds, MMOs, and action-adventure games coming in 2024 so you can start building your wish list. The very first release of the year is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, a 2.5D platformer that's the first major title for the series since Forgotten Sands back in 2010. The game looks pretty good for what it is, but I get the impression this isn't really the game Prince of Persia fans are looking for, so we'll see how it goes. It releases January 18th on all platforms. More in my wheelhouse is The Last of Us Part 2 Remaster. I think this really should have been called a director's cut, as it does include graphical improvements like a typical remaster, but the main focus is really the addition of new content, primarily the roguelike no return mode that has you fighting through a series of encounters to see how long you can survive. There will be new unlockable characters in this mode and supposedly a ranked leaderboard for daily runs. We'll also get a few lost levels to explore, so basically some levels that didn't make it into the final game. There's also a built-in speedrunning mode, Ellie and Abby will have some new unlockable outfit and weapon skins, and guitar free play with new unlockable instruments. Now, I thought they might announce the PC port with this remaster, but after the issues Naughty Dog had with the Part 1 PC port and the online project being shut down a few weeks ago, it sounds like they're taking a bit more time on the PC port for Part 2. Maybe we'll see it later in the year. For now, the remaster costs $10 US if you already own the game, and it releases on January 19th for PS5. There's not much else going on in January besides, of course, Tekken 8, launching on the 26th for PC and current-gen consoles. Not really my type of game, but if you're into fighting games, then this one is definitely on your radar. February, on the other hand, is looking much more interesting. One of my most anticipated underdog titles is Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden. Like others have said, this one gives me some God of War vibes, but it also definitely has its own unique style and mechanics. The game takes place in the late 1600s in New Eden, a fictional region of North American settlements where the settlers are plagued by a curse. We play as Red and Antea, a pair of lovers and banishers, or basically ghost hunters, who take on the burden of lifting the curse. The twist is Antea, the more experienced banisher, has recently died, and playing primarily as Red, we're faced with the dilemma of choosing to either resurrect her by stealing souls from living people, going against our banisher oath, or helping her ascend to the afterlife, losing her forever. Stealing souls from the living might sound like something to obviously avoid, but the thing is, the souls you'll have the option to take won't be from clearly good or bad people. Instead, you'll constantly be playing in a moral gray area, deciding the fate of spirits who likely did something terrible but might also have some redeeming qualities. This choice-based gameplay will certainly be the standout feature of Banishers, with the developers stating there are 5 different endings depending on your choices throughout the game. But I'm also quite interested in the combat. We'll have a mix of melee with a sword and the offhand Firebane torch, as well as firearms like muskets for a bit of range. We can also switch to fight as Antea with her supernatural abilities, which, outside of combat, are used to solve environmental puzzles. Of course, there's also plenty of your standard RPG elements here, like gear, skills, and stats for both characters. Overall, I'm definitely looking forward to diving into this one. Banishers releases on PC, PS5, and current-gen Xbox consoles on February 13th. The other big one in February is definitely Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the second in a trilogy of remakes of the popular original title. Final Fantasy VII Remake, the first of the remakes, was released in 2020 and it got great reviews, especially after the Integrate Enhanced version was released in 2021. So Rebirth is sure to be a hit with fans of the series. But I would also mention, for those of you who haven't played a Final Fantasy game, don't be intimidated to jump into Rebirth or another Final Fantasy like 2023's Final Fantasy XVI as your first. Each Final Fantasy game tells a new story with a new set of characters in a new location. All that really carries over from one to the next are a broad set of world-building elements, like crystals that hold some sort of power, chocobos, and moogles. So you certainly don't need to have played other Final Fantasies to enjoy Rebirth if it looks interesting to you. Rebirth launches on February 29th as a PS5 exclusive. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League will actually kick off February on the 2nd. Not really my cup of tea, as I'm not really invested in the DC universe or superhero games in general, but I know this is a big one for some people and it's coming to PC and current-gen consoles. On February 8th, we have Helldivers 2, the first and actually one of the only PlayStation Studios games currently with a 2024 release date. Though we'll talk about some more PlayStation games that should pop up in 2024 in just a bit. It'll also be one of the first shooters PlayStation has done in a long time. Helldivers isn't exactly up my alley either, but when the first one launched back in 2015, it was fairly popular, so I think the sequel should have a decent audience. The other big game for February will be Skull and Bones. That is, if they can actually finally release it this time. This pirate sim MMO has been delayed at least 6 times since it was announced in 2017, but it sounds like they will finally release it on February 16th for PC and current-gen consoles. Heading into March, we have one of the games I think could be a bit of a sleeper hit. Outcast: A New Beginning is an action-adventure RPG set on the lush alien world of Adelpha. We play as Cutter Slade, an ex-Navy SEAL taking on an invading robot army that's attempting to enslave the native Talon people and strip the planet of its natural resources. The robots aren't the only threat though, as some of Adelpha's native creatures, like the giant Garandar worms, are hostile as well. Not only can we take these enemies on with a blaster, customizable with dozens of modules, but we also have an energy shield that can be used offensively and plenty of mobility options like an air dash, wingsuit, and even a giant flying mount. Plus, we can learn special abilities based on the Talon's powerful connection with nature, like the ability to trigger gravity inversions and call in airstrikes from the local flying creatures. Beyond combat, it looks like we'll have a pretty beautiful open world to explore and settlements where we can engage with the Talon. Believe it or not, A New Beginning is a sequel to the original Outcast, which launched nearly 25 years ago in 1999. The original Outcast is actually regarded as the first 3D open world video game. Period. And it also established some of the core action-adventure elements used by games in the genre today. As its name suggests, A New Beginning will serve as a reboot to the franchise, assuming it does well, with the original developers involved in its creation. Outcast is set to release on March 15th for PC and current-gen consoles, but I'm sort of hoping they decide to push that date out, because between Final Fantasy VII Rebirth 2 weeks earlier and our next couple of games dropping the following Friday, they've squeezed themselves into a pretty crowded period. Plus, I think they definitely missed an opportunity to show a trailer at the Game Awards, so I think they need a little more time to start drumming up interest. Those next 2 games are Rise of the Ronin and Dragon's Dogma 2, a couple of big releases that I think will only garner more hype as we get closer. I still haven't decided which one I'm more interested in, and unfortunately, they release on the same day, March 22nd. Rise of the Ronin is a PS5 exclusive set in 19th century Japan. For those of you looking to play this to get your Ghost of Tsushima fix while we wait for Ghost 2, that's about 600 years after Jin's time. As opposed to the first Mongol invasion of Japan, which is the backdrop for Ghost, Ronin's plot will play out during the Boshin War, a civil war essentially fought over tensions regarding Western influence on Japan's economy and culture. So from a gameplay perspective, this means we'll have access to not only traditional weapons like a katana, but also firearms introduced by Westerners. So definitely an interesting setting, and the combat looks like it could be a lot of fun. The part I'm not convinced of yet is the story. We just haven't been shown very much about it, so I'm hoping a solid story trailer can seal the deal on this one. I could see a story trailer or some kind of deep dive dropping at a PlayStation event in February or early March, which feels like about the time PlayStation should be giving us an update on a lot of projects anyway. There's definitely some other things they need to clear up with Ronin though. For example, I don't think most people realize you can actually play it as a co-op with up to 3 friends to help out with missions, or that there's actually more than one main character and you can switch between them seamlessly in combat. Definitely some interesting stuff going on here that I want to know more about. Like I mentioned, Dragon's Dogma 2 launches on March 22nd as well. So unless Sony or Capcom decides to push one of them, I think a lot of us will have to decide which to play first. While Ronin is loosely based on real history in Japan, Dragon's Dogma takes place in Grancis, a proper high fantasy world with magic, fantastic creatures, and all that good stuff. It is a single-player game, but you'll be accompanied by a few AI companions who will help you in combat, interact with you, and sometimes even catch you when you fall. As for your character, called the Arisen, you'll begin by choosing from 4 main starting classes: a fighter, mage, thief, or ranger, with more advanced classes that mix the abilities of these base classes unlocked later on, like the Mystic Spearhand and Magic Archer. You don't have to worry too much about which class you pick at the start though, because you can switch any time by visiting a vocation guild. And regardless of your class, it looks like we'll also be able to use the environment to to help take enemies down. It sounds like the story will be similar to the first Dragon's Dogma, focused on ultimately defeating a dragon that's seen as an omen for the end of days. Progression looks to be pretty open though, with exploration and side questing encouraged. I'll have to see if the story can hook me this time. I can't say it did in the first game, but the gameplay here does look good, so I'm looking forward to giving it another shot. Dragon's Dogma 2 releases on PC and current-gen consoles on February 22nd, alongside Rise of the Ronin. Beyond March, there's actually very few games nailed down yet. After a troubled year with Destiny and their now infamous layoff, Bungie will release the Final Shape expansion for Destiny 2 on June 4th. That is, unless it gets delayed again. Destiny fans should definitely stick around though, because I've got a game I want to show you that I think could be your new home if you're looking for one. But first, the last game we have a solid release date on is Black Myth Wukong, an action RPG based on a very popular Chinese novel from the 16th century called Journey to the West. This means the game is steeped in Chinese folklore and mythology of the era, leading to some really interesting world and character design that I think will feel very different from what we typically see in games based in Western cultures. The combat also looks very dynamic, and I'm hoping it can bring some fresh new mechanics and ideas. I'll be really interested to see how Black Myth does in Western markets. There's a bunch of new Chinese and Indian studios launching games globally soon through PlayStation's China and India Hero projects. So I see Black Myth as a bit of a litmus test for how successful these new games could be. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a bunch of games slated for 2024 without release dates yet, so I'll go in my best estimate of chronological order from here forward. If you're at all familiar with my channel, then you know I've got to mention the PC port for Horizon Forbidden West. We know it's coming in quote early 2024, and my best guess, which is maybe a little bit more than a best guess, is sometime in quarter 2, so April, May, or June. We don't have any recommended PC specs yet, but like I mentioned before, I think it makes sense that we'll see a PlayStation event early in the year, like February or March. And I'd expect to get a solid release date, recommended specs, and other details for Forbidden West at that time. Another game I've been looking for an update on is Stellar Blade, a post-apocalyptic action RPG where we play as Eve, fighting to reclaim Earth from alien invaders called natives. The combat will be heavily combo-based, and of course looks super flashy. At a surface level, I am intrigued by the premise of the story, but I'd like to know if the characters and narrative have any depth, or if this is just a flashy hack and slash with a lot of, well, you know, that. Sony is publishing and investing pretty heavily in this one. It was supposed to release at the end of 2023, but we haven't heard anything in months. So I'm hoping that's because with Sony's investment, they're working to make it really good. A Stellar Blade update is definitely overdue. Another update I know a lot of you are waiting on is for the Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. Rumors for an early 2024 release were restoked recently when a few eagle-eyed Redditors noticed listings for a new Thrustmaster controller mentioned that they would, quote, sync with the release of the new Shadow of the Erdtree expansion and be available in February 2024. The listings have since been removed, and even reposted screenshots keep getting taken down, so it seems like this is indeed legit information, but I'm still not totally convinced the DLC is releasing in February. It seems odd that they wouldn't have released a trailer at the Game Awards in December, though FromSoft does have a history of dropping DLCs without announcing them at a major event. I could also see the controller listing actually meaning that pre-orders will begin in February, with the DLC release coming later, maybe March or April. The first half of 2024 definitely seems likely, and at this point I'm just hoping it and the Forbidden West PC port stay well clear of each other. A third time where Horizon gets its launch spotlight stolen would only solidify the curse. We mentioned Final Fantasy XVI earlier, and we're expecting the Rising Tide DLC for that game in spring as well. We got a surprise at the Game Awards when it was announced the Echoes of the Fallen DLC was dropping that night, so that one is actually out now for $10 US. But based on the fact that you'll be able to buy both DLCs bundled for $25, the Rising Tide is looking to be a larger expansion. I'm also thinking it would make sense for a complete edition of the game to launch on PC at the same time, so new players can start with all the content. The base game was really good, so a Final Fantasy XVI Complete Edition could be a pretty big PC release for the spring. Getting back to full game releases, we have Dune Awakening, another one that I think could be a sleeper hit. Of course, this is based on the Dune series of novels by Frank Herbert, and is looking to build on the success of the 2021 film. The developers, Funcom, are best known for their survival game Conan Exiles, so it's not too surprising that Dune Awakening will be a survival MMO. We'll start with basically nothing but a knife, needing to learn to survive on the desert planet of Arrakis. After getting basic survival under control, with a core mechanic being water management, we'll be ready to explore, and exploration is one of the things I'm most interested in. The developers have stated massive sandstorms will change the map on a regular basis, burying and uncovering the landscape, crashed spaceships, and ancient facilities where we can find valuable information and resources. Just like in the books though, venturing into the desert will attract massive sandworms, as well as rival groups, so it will have to be done strategically. There is a very good reason to go out there though: the spice. Arrakis is the only known place in the universe where spice can be found, a highly addicting and incredibly valuable psychedelic drug. To control the spice and maintain your safety, it will be critical to establish and expand your base. We'll also be able to craft weapons, armor, vehicles, attachments, and modifications to defend against rival groups and take them on in the field. Ultimately, you can work towards establishing a guild and asserting dominance through resource control. It all sounds really interesting to me, but I'm still a bit hesitant about the MMO aspect. These survival MMOs like Ark often devolve into people trolling each other, so I'm hoping Dune has some mechanics to prevent that. It also remains to be seen what the balance will be between PvP and PvE. Will we primarily compete against other player groups, or is the focus on battling for survival against the harsh environment? I'm hoping for more information soon. Dune had its first closed beta at the end of 2023, and a second should be coming up soon. The second Dune movie is slated to release on March 15th. So it's possible they'll want to release the game around then as well, but I'm thinking they'll probably want to do an open beta first, which would push the release to sometime this summer or fall. Let's switch back to single player games for a minute though, with a few Xbox titles. Avowed is a new high fantasy action RPG that reminds me a bit of Dragon's Dogma, though the world looks more colorful and the plot is quite different. We play as a powerful mage sent to investigate a plague ravaging a mysterious island called the Living Lands. Gameplay is first person, with ruin-based magic as a major mechanic, alongside melee with weapons like swords. We don't know much else about this one, other than the fact that the plague clearly causes creatures to become deranged and aggressive. I'm personally not a big fan of first-person gameplay, but if the story turns out to be good, I'd be up for giving this one a shot. Avowed is coming to PC and current-gen Xbox consoles sometime in 2024. Another Xbox exclusive is Hellblade 2. This dark, edgy series takes place in Iceland during the time of Vikings. After conquering her inner demons in the first game, it sounds like this go-around, Senua intends to save others from the darkness. While the series is a bit dark for my tastes, there's no doubt that the first game was a visual spectacle and narrative success, winning a number of awards, and it's looking like the sequel will take things to the next level. Hellblade 2 is slated for PC and current-gen Xbox consoles. As for PlayStation exclusives, the only other one we currently know about for 2024 is Concord, a sci-fi themed first-person shooter developed by Firewalk, a new studio whose work looked so good Sony had to snatch them up and make them a PlayStation studio in 2023. We literally just have a brief teaser trailer and very short PlayStation blog post on this one, but it does have a 2024 release date, so I would expect to learn a lot more about this whenever we get our first PlayStation event in the new year. A co-op game we know much more about, and that I'm really interested in, is The First Descendant. This looter shooter is the potential new haven for Destiny players I was alluding to earlier. Most multiplayer games don't intrigue me, but Descendant is looking like it might have that rare blend of interesting lore, fun combat mechanics, and an addictive gear grind that could get me hooked. The 11 class characters we currently know about all look pretty interesting too, with unique combat abilities, engaging personalities, and interesting backstories. I also really like that the game is co-op PvE, so we'll be focused on cooperatively taking down massive enemies with friends as opposed to fighting each other. A bit like what I hope the Horizon Online project ends up being. And Descendant can be played solo if you want. It's not totally clear how much of the game can be soloed, but there are confirmed solo missions. And it seems like you might even be able to do some of the co-op missions on your own if you want to. It remains to be seen how feasible that is, but I'd certainly be down for the challenge. The first Descendant is scheduled for a summer 2024 launch on PC, as well as current and last-gen consoles. And it will be free to play with some sort of battle pass for monetization. I'll definitely be keeping my eye on this one. Now, even though we don't have solid release dates yet, the second half of 2024 should be pretty loaded as well. Of course, we have two behemoths, one being Assassin's Creed codename Red, which, based on previous AC releases, will likely launch in the October-November timeframe. In addition to Rise of the Ronin, Ghost of Tsushima fans might be interested in this one as well, even if you've never played an AC game, as it's set in feudal Japan. We'll also be able to choose between playing as a female ninja or male African samurai. AC codename Red will likely launch on current-gen consoles and PC, and it'll certainly be a massive release. The other behemoth likely slated for the end of the year is Star Wars Outlaws. Given the massive popularity of the franchise, any Star Wars game is always going to garner a lot of hype, but this one looks like it could be one of the biggest yet. Chronologically taking place between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, we'll be trading lightsabers for blasters to play as Kay Vess, a cunning thief who has fought to make a life for herself amidst the Empire's war with the Rebel Alliance. In Outlaws, she's looking to pull off the biggest heist the Outer Rim has ever seen. And of course, in classic Star Wars fashion, I'm sure her and her adorable companion Nix will be dragged into something much bigger than they expected. Like AC codename Red, Outlaws is sure to be one of the biggest games of the year, and I expect it to drop sometime in the last quarter, if it doesn't get pushed to 2025. It'll launch on PC and current-gen consoles. Another big one that actually hasn't been announced yet is Dragon Age Dreadwolf, a sequel to 2014's Inquisition. Inquisition had somewhat mixed reviews, but it was adored by many, and the franchise certainly has a sizable following. With nearly a decade of pent-up demand for more in this series, Dreadwolf could certainly be a hit, especially since I think it will be attractive to those that enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3. So if people are itching for another Baldur's Gate experience, I can see that translating well for Dragon Age Dreadwolf. It's officially slated for a full reveal this summer, so I think it's safe to assume we'll see it before the end of the year. On a much smaller scale, we have Steel Seed, a stealth action adventure set in a sci-fi world. The main character Zoe is on a mission to save her father in a post-apocalyptic world, with the help of her robotic companion Kobe, who can scout out threats, assist in combat, and even hack the robot enemies to make them fight for you. It's definitely a lower budget game from a smaller studio, but I think it could be a fun one, so I'm keeping my eye on it. Steel Seed is set to launch for PC and current-gen consoles. There's a handful of other big games that could launch in 2024 as well. Perhaps the biggest would be Death Stranding 2, which I was surprised didn't show up at the 2023 Game Awards, but maybe Kojima will line up a trailer for a PlayStation event in early 2024. I have my fingers crossed that we get a proper trailer for the Wonder Woman game being developed by Monolith, the same studio that did Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. Supposedly, Wonder Woman will use the same Nemesis system as these games, which had enemies advancing to higher levels and remembering you if they had beaten you previously, making combat encounters much more interesting. We don't know much else about the Wonder Woman game, but I think it could be really cool, though it could certainly be a 2025 title. We could also see the God of War Atreus spin-off game released in 2024. Santa Monica Studios gave us all a nice holiday surprise, dropping the free Ragnarok DLC in December, but I'm guessing it was also a strategic move to get God of War back in the spotlight a bit. It would make sense to hype things up again a little bit if they have an announcement for the Atreus game coming. Again, I think this is something we could see announced at an early 2024 PlayStation event. It sounds like it would be a bit like Miles Morales for the Spider-Man series, a shorter game between main entries, but I can definitely still have fun with that. And now there's a rumor floating around that the original God of War trilogy will get some sort of remaster. We'll see if that pans out. If we get any major updates on these games or new announcements, I'll definitely do another roundup video like this, and link it right here when it's live. Until then, let me know what games are on your list. I'm sure I missed a few. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.